Questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from David Rees.
What discussions has the Welsh Government had with counterparts in the UK Government about the future of the steel industry in Wales?
So can I thank the member for that question and for his consistent advocacy of the importance of the steel industry in Wales. As he will know, we are in regular discussions with the UK Government. We continue to press them to discharge their responsibilities, to support strategic manufacturing in Wales, and to play their part in securing a long-term future for our steel industry.
Well, thank you for that answer, First Minister. As you rightly point out, the UK Government needs to play its part. It hasn't even done a steel sector deal yet. The previous Secretary of State and the current Secretary of State seem to be oblivious to actually the importance of addressing this issue of our steel sector. Now, as you know, Thorpe Steelworks is crucial to my constituency. Many steelworks across the areas in Wales are actually the lifeblood of many local communities. And whilst I want to talk about Thorpe, I actually think it's more important we talk about the wider steel agenda and the recent announcement by Tata of closing the Orb Works. The Orb Works is part of the steel family in Wales, as part of the structure of Wales. What actions is the Welsh Government taking to look at the help it can give to the workers of the Orb Works? Because even though Tata is saying they will relocate many, actually what that does is take away jobs from other people and the jobs of future people coming into the Orb Works. Opportunities will disappear. So what's the Welsh Government going to do to ensure that the Orb Works and the workers has a future?
Well, so I thank David Rees for that follow-up question. Of course, he is right. It is deeply disappointing that the UK Government has failed to deliver a sector deal for the steel industry, despite the many opportunities that we have taken to put that case to them, and they won't do it because they have failed to solve some of the issues that lie directly in their own hands. Time after time, the industry and the Welsh Government have urged the UK Government to tackle the issue of industrial electricity price disparity between the United Kingdom and competitors of Tata on the continent of Europe. As recently as the 27th of August, my colleague Ken Skates was discussing this with the new Secretary of State at Bays. It's time for the UK Government to step up and to play their part in supporting the steel industry in Port Talbot and more widely in Wales. And of course it is disappointing to have had the news on the 2nd of September that no buyer has been found for the Orb site in Newport. It's disappointing for Wales, and it's extremely worrying for workers at that plant. Now, I welcome the fact that Tata have said that they aim to avoid compulsory redundancies and to offer alternative employment at other sites. But that consultation that's been carried out with staff needs to be real. It needs to attend carefully to the case being made by the trade unions on behalf of their members, and as a Welsh Government we will work with the trade union movement as well as with the company to do everything we can to support that very loyal and very skilled workforce.
Mark Isherwood.
Diolch Llywydd. Speaking here in 2015 in the debate which called on the Welsh Government to adopt a charter for British sustainable steel, I noted that Tata Steel Colours and Shotton were not only critically dependent upon the supply chain for sustainable British steel, but also their emphasis on commitment to investment in improving their environmental performance and sustainability, where they were working with Welsh Government and Natural Resource Wales to meet the industrial emissions directives. What engagement has the Welsh Government had with the UK Government since its March announcement of a consultation on an industrial energy transformation fund to help businesses with high energy use cut their bills, particularly steel, backed up by £315 million of investment?
Well, the Welsh Government was the first signatory of the Steel Charter earlier this year. And of course we work both with the industry and where there are opportunities with the UK Government. The Industrial Energy Transformation Fund was discussed by my colleague Ken Skates at the opportunity that I mentioned a few moments ago. And we will pursue as well the Clean Steel Fund that was announced on the 29th of August, not intended to be operational before 2024, but offering opportunities across the United Kingdom. And I think it is very important indeed that we emphasise that to the UK Government, that this is to be a fund which is to be spent in Wales as well as elsewhere to assist the sector in its transition to low-carbon iron and steel production through new technologies and processes, and that will be very important for us here in Wales.
Rhina Piorwerth.
The announcement about the orb works in Newport obviously was devastating for the workers involved, but it's also devastating for the potential of the steel industry in Wales. I think Tata said that converting the site to producing steels for future electric vehicle production would cost in excess of £50 million. Now, what negotiations did Welsh Government get involved in either finding or making or contributing towards that kind of investment? Because £50 million would have been an absolute bargain in terms of securing the future of the plant and the potential that it offered in terms of this key sector.
Well, Llywydd, the £50 million investment is only one part of the set of reasons that were identified by Tata in coming to their decision. Not only did they say that it would require an investment of that scale, but they also point to the fact that Orb Electrical Steels is part of the Cogent Power Group, and Cogent have a plant in Sweden which already manufactures steel that is used in electric vehicles. So the money by itself was not the issue. It's an issue of the global construction of the steel industry and where companies choose to make their investments and where they choose to source the steel that they need. Now, of course, we would like to see that investment in Wales. Of course, we think there is a powerful case for making sure that there is a UK supplier of the sort of steel that will be needed for electric vehicles and the wider automotive industry. And we make that case to Tata and with our trade union colleagues. But the steel industry is in a global set of difficulties and concerns. And Tata Steel and the events at Orb cannot be isolated from those wider considerations for which the UK government has to take a responsibility.
John Griffiths.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, steel has been made at the Orb site in Newport East since the end of the 19th century. And over that 120 years or so, the workforce and production have continually changed and adapted, and investment has been made to meet the evolving demand for steel. And I do think that, given that track record, it's perfectly possible for further change and adaptation to occur with necessary investment to produce electrical steel for the mass production of electric cars in the future. And surely there's a strong case for that electrical steel to be produced here in the UK and at the Orb site. So I would be very grateful if you would redouble your efforts, First Minister, to work with UK government, the trade unions and industry to look at facilitating and encouraging that investment and that strong future for the Orb works.
Well, thank John Griffiths, who speaks, I know, on behalf of those many individuals and families in his own constituency who are affected by the announcement. The Minister for Economy and Transport spoke to Tata Steel immediately following the announcement to make these points to them, that they have this long history of an immensely loyal, committed workforce who've gone through many changes in the past and would be with them on a journey of change if they were willing to pursue it in the future. And there is, as John Griffiths said, and as I said in my answer to Rhyn ap Iorwerth, there is a strategic case for ensuring that in the United Kingdom there is a capacity to manufacture steel that will be needed for new forms of vehicles and new possibilities in the future. We make all those points to the company where we have those opportunities, while at the same time making it clear to that workforce that should the assistance of the Welsh Government and the approach we put in place when people need to find new skills and new job opportunities, we will be there to support them when that time comes.
Question 2, David Rowland.
Question 2, David Rowland.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the additional funding provided to the Welsh Government by the UK Government?
Well, Llywydd, even if the additional funding to which the member refers materialises, the Welsh Government's budget will be 2% or £300 million lower in real terms than it was in 2010-11. unreliable one-year funding, even when additional, fails to make up for nearly a decade of austerity.
First Minister, perhaps I should have welcomed you back from your Brexit bunker today, but I thank the First Minister for that answer. We all understand that whatever funding is given is never enough. But isn't it true to say that a less profligate approach to financial control by the Welsh Government would release more funding into our public services? By this I mean the losses sustained with the government projects such as the M4 Relief Road, Cardiff Land Deal, the Year of the Sea, Circuit of Wales and Communities First, which together cost just under £600 million, a figure which about matches the sum afforded Wales by the UK Government. And there are no doubt many more examples of poor financial management by the Labour Welsh Government, which I could have cited. Surely we should be looking at the way we approach financial control rather than looking for largesse from Westminster.
Well, entirely disagree with the member. He completely misses the point, and the examples that he cites don't stand up to examination either. The money that was spent in Communities First did fantastic work in many communities right across Wales. The scheme had reached the limits of its possibilities, and we have reformed and changed it. The decision in relation to the Circuit of Wales was not to spend money, not to throw money away. It was to make sure that money wasn't badly spent. The Welsh Government has the best record of any part of the United Kingdom in spending the money that comes to us in Wales. We spend over 99% of the budget that is available to us in Wales, and we do so by investing in our very hard-pressed public services. Public services that have had to endure a decade of not having the money through the UK Government that was necessary to sustain them in the face of the demands that we know are there in Welsh society. It would be a lot better if the member were prepared to speak up for people in Wales and for the investment that they need.
Nick Ramsey.
Diolch, Llywydd. Well, First Minister, you should be on the stage. The way that you managed to put a negative spin on those statistics without breaking into even a wry smile, you're to be commended on that. I hear what you're saying, that there has been a period of cutbacks in Westminster, which saw cutbacks in the Welsh Government budget as well for a period of time. But even you must accept that the recent spending review will deliver next year, like it or not, it will deliver a real terms increase of 2.3% over and above the money that's currently in the block grant coming to Wales. That's around £600 million a year, as Dave Rowlands referred to. If you look into the deeper figures of that, that's around £195 million that's being earmarked for education in Westminster, £385 million earmarked to health. Your advisers will know this as well as I do. Can you give us a guarantee that it's up to the Welsh Government now to decide how you spend that money? Can you give us a guarantee that that money will be passed on to the public service in Wales that need it most, so that you can get on with the job which you were charged to do of defending public services in Wales, of defending the Welsh way of life? Because people in Wales aren't always convinced that's happened in the past. You are in a golden opportunity, a perfect position to prove people wrong who are negative, and show that you can stand up for public services in Wales.
So for a decade, we have been lectured by members on that side of the chamber. Austerity was unavoidable. Austerity was something over which there was no choice. There was apparently no magic money tree. Now that they've shredded all of that and finally taken decision to turn their back on it, they expect us to be rejoicing on this side of the chamber. A little more humility on the part of the party opposite would not go amiss. And let me tell Nick Ramsey why it is that we are not prepared to enter into the spirit of his question. First of all, what guarantee do we have that this money will ever arrive in Wales? Governments can only spend money that parliaments vote to them, and this parliament has not voted on the sums of money announced last week. When will this government put a money bill in front of the Westminster Parliament so that we could have confidence that these sums of money will arise? They're not going to do that while Parliament is prorogued. They're not going to do that while the Prime Minister seeks a general election, and they're not going to do it when they don't have a majority in the floor of the House of Commons for anything that they announce. So, first of all, I don't feel that we can be confident that this money will arrive at all. When it does arrive, Llywydd, of course, the Westminster Government will have spent large sums of it on our behalf. We now learn that the 85% contribution to the pension costs that government has imposed on us is to be put into our baseline. So not only did we lose out by £50 million this year, but we're going to lose out by £50 million every year into the future. So that money has already been frittered away by decisions made by the UK government. And why is it, Llywydd, that whereas public services in England are told that they have a 3-year settlement and they know how much money there will be for education, not just next year, but for 2 years after that, we in Wales are not given a 3-year settlement at all? Of course, the money we get will be invested in public services. That's exactly what we do with all the money that comes our way. It'd be nice if we were treated on the same basis as departments elsewhere and given the same opportunity.
Davis.
Thank you and welcome back to you all here today.
Right, in that we haven't seen a penny piece of this money yet. We wait to see it. We hope that it will be seen, but it goes no way towards making up the widening austerity gap that has emerged over a decade. But this adds to, of course, the lack of certainty over the future of the Shared Prosperity Fund, the lack of sign-off because of prorogation on the previous Chancellor's commitments on sustaining existing EU funding commitments, which are vital for supply chain as well as higher education and training and so on. And also, of course, the fact that he's alluded to that we have no long-term multi-annual CSR settlement because Parliament is not there to sit and do it. Nothing has been ratified. There is one thing, however, that we do have increasing clarity on, and that is the implications of a no-deal Brexit. And I wonder if he's had time to read the report by the UK in a Change in Europe group on a no-deal Brexit, the issues, the impact, implications, because that makes crystal clear what the effects on Wales and every part of the UK will be if we crash out in a no-deal scenario.
Well, thank Hugh Davis for that question. There were two shocking things about the CSR announced earlier this month. First, that it only lasted for 1 year, whereas we were being promised by the Conservative government at Westminster right up until July that it would be a 3-year settlement that we would have, and that evaporated in a matter of weeks. And surely it was shocking to everybody in this chamber that the Chancellor made not a single mention of the Shared Prosperity Fund. Month after month after month, we are told by UK ministers that they will honour their promise to Wales that we would not be a penny worse off as a result of leaving the European Union because they have a Shared Prosperity Fund. Month after month, we are told that it's only round the corner that they will have a consultation on that fund and we will be able to see the colour of their money. Now we know that we're not going to hear anything until the next calendar year, and the Chancellor failed to mention it even once. The amount of money we get through, or will expect to get, through the Shared Prosperity Fund would be in excess of the £600 million that Nick Ramsey mentioned as coming through the CSR. Hugh Davis is absolutely right to point to the fact that without that certainty, our partners here in Wales are unable to plan ahead in the way we would want them to do. And I have had an opportunity to see the Changing Europe report. A no deal means a prolonged period of uncertainty. Half of UK goods exports will face disruption. It will reduce the safety of UK citizens. The UK's international reputation may suffer. And is there any wonder why time after time after time on the floor of this chamber we have warned about the catastrophic effect that leaving the European Union without a deal will have here in Wales?
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition, Paul Davis.
First Minister, do you believe that your government responds appropriately and immediately to the needs of the people of Wales?
This government responds every day to the needs of people in Wales, in the health service, in providing housing for people, in the education services that we provide. Is at the core of what we do as a government.
Well, First Minister, let's discuss some of your immediate proposals, shall we? Back at the start of June, you made the decision to cancel the M4 relief road and waste £144 million of taxpayers' money in the process. Now, as part of that statement, you made it clear that a commission would be created and would come forward with a first set of immediate proposals that can be put to work to begin to alleviate the problems experienced on the M4. You even said that you recognise that the action is required more than ever, given the significance of these problems, and you concluded by saying, we will begin on that work immediately. However, since the 25th of June, there has been no further updates about the work of this commission, the membership, or what immediate proposals are taking place. In fact, as I understand it, the Commission's initial report has now been pushed back to spring 2020 instead of December this year, and your government has been squabbling over its budget. Your government delayed making the initial decision and even hid behind the Newport West by-election. So, First Minister, what is the excuse now for this further delay?
Well, it's disappointing to hear that the leader of the Conservative Party here in Wales is as careless with the necessary conventions of our political life as his leader is in Westminster. The reason we delayed the announcement because of the Newport by-election is that is because what the rules of by-elections require. Now, I know that his party isn't keen on rules. I know that they don't care about whether or not they observe the way that things ought to be conducted, but it's disappointing to hear the leader of the opposition here align himself with that way of conducting public life here in Wales. And while he talks about the waste of public money on major public infrastructure projects, presumably he wasn't reading when his government made an announcement on HS2 and the billions of pounds which have been squandered by his government on that. The Burns Review has been working hard over the summer. It is working actively. It is recruiting the other members of the Commission it will need. We will announce those names very shortly. It will hold its first public engagement event next month, and I expect that the next set of proposals from the review will be with us by the end of this calendar year, as we have said all along.
Well, you have been squabbling over the money that is actually available to this commission, because on the 12th of July, you said that Lord Burns has the first call on all of that £1 billion. But 5 days later, your economy minister said we're not going to be inviting the Commission to spend £1 billion. So as a government, First Minister, you're all over the place on this. Who is right, you or your economy minister? Now another area where your government wanted immediate action is on the climate change emergency. So far, you have failed to bring forward substantial immediate proposals to tackle the climate emergency. What has been announced has been more of the same, when we know that what we need now is not more of the same, but innovative ideas to reduce our damage to the planet. Now, the £30 million for active travel will do nothing to help if the trains and buses across Wales are constantly delayed, full to bursting, and put people off rather than encourage them on board. The latest bus journey figures show that 20 million fewer bus journeys are being taken in Wales. What radical ideas does your government have in mind when it declared the climate emergency? And when will you be bringing them forward? Because other nations, for example, have banned single-use plastics, and yet all your government can say is that it is committed to a ban. When will your government, First Minister, be introducing a ban and stop just thinking about it?
Well, it's difficult to pick out much of sense in what I've just been asked. On the issue of the money for the Burns Commission, the Burns Commission has first call on the £1 billion that was originally set aside for the M4 relief road. Lord Burns, when he met me as a former permanent secretary at the Treasury, made it clear that did not mean that he expected to spend £1 million. He wasn't aiming to spend £1 billion. What he knows is that if he needs £1 billion, it will be there at his disposal. It doesn't mean it's an ambition for him to do so. The climate emergency question linked to the M4 relief road suggests that irony has long been lost on the benches opposite. How does he, on the one hand, want to complain about not building an M4 relief road and then complain that we're not taking a climate emergency seriously? The two things simply cannot be held in the mind at the same time. We have published a whole series of other practical proposals that we will take as a government to respond to the climate emergency. We will introduce 20-mile-per-hour zones as standard in our urban areas. We will introduce regulations to tackle agricultural pollution in January next year. We are focused on those practical things that the Welsh Government can do, and we will deliver against them here in Wales.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Adam Price.
Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price.
First Minister, which do you think represents a brighter future for Wales, Brexit or independence?
Well, it's clearly not a choice that any sensible person would seek to make, Llywydd. The bright future for Wales lies in a strong Wales with an entrenched devolution settlement, taking domestic decisions here in our hands, in a strong United Kingdom and in a successful Europe. That's what I believe the best future for Wales will be. Wales in the United Kingdom in the European Union.
What kind of United Kingdom? As we saw over the summer from Caernarfon to Merthyr, thousands are on the march in Wales, and on independence, the tide is turning. And you risk, First Minister, being overtaken by events as history is accelerating, and it's happened, of course, on more than one occasion against the backdrop of Brexit. Over the summer, you still said in one of your first ministerial videos that you wanted to leave the European Union on the best of terms. The Shadow Chancellor, who wanted to back Remain, has been rebuked by Len McCluskey, Labour's largest donor. Even your own health minister says your party's policy of being both Leave and Remain deserves ridicule. Do you?
Well, so let me begin by saying that I understand the frustration and the anger that many people here in Wales feel at the current UK government and at the way in which events since the referendum have unfolded. It's no wonder, I think, that people feel let down. But I am clear in my mind that the answer to those feelings of frustration and anger is not independence. Surely, Llywydd, the answer that people ought to draw from the Brexit experience is that borders create divisions. They create divisions inside societies and between societies, that they damage economies, that they reduce protections. The power of the union, as people on this side of the chamber understand, is a power that exists inside the union of the United Kingdom and inside the union of the European Union. That's the message of the Labour movement, and that's why we believe that the answer to the frustrations and the anger that people feel is to create a successful future for Wales as part of both of those wider set of arrangements. And that's the position of the Welsh Labour Party. The Labour Party will offer people in the United Kingdom a chance to vote again, a call that he has made in this chamber many, many times. A Labour government will deliver that. And in a second referendum, the Welsh Labour Party will campaign to persuade people in Wales that our future is better off in the European Union.
Yeah. There are 44 days now, of course, until Boris Johnson tries to force through a no-deal Brexit. Now, our clear preference to prevent this from happening would be to hold a people's vote before an election. But if we have a general election instead, it will become the people's vote by proxy with a Tory no deal on the ballot paper. Now, if this does happen, then it seems vitally important to me that there is a clear Remain option on the ballot paper too. Now, your Brexit minister, the Council General, said in July that we, the Labour Party, should be advocating Remain in the manifesto rather than a referendum and seeking a mandate to revoke on that basis. Now, you didn't answer whether you disagreed with Vaughan Gethin, but do you disagree with Jeremy Miles?
Well, I've put the position of the Welsh Labour Party, Llywydd, and I put it again, I put it in the Welsh Assembly, because I am responsible for the position of the Welsh Labour Party. In a general election, the position here in Wales will be clear. The Welsh Labour Party believes that our future is better secured inside the United Kingdom, and we will say that loud and clear, and you will argue to take Wales out of the United Kingdom, and we will argue that Wales should remain in a United Kingdom that remains in the European Union. Both of those things are right for Wales. Only the Labour Party will argue for them both, and I look forward to the chance to do exactly that.
Arweinydd Plaid Brexit, Mark.
Leader of the Brexit Party, Mark Reckless.
First Minister, 12 days ago you made a calculated decision to allege that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom had lied. How would you describe the statement, "We will deliver a relief road for the M4"?
Well, shall we have dealt with the relief road question? I have it from a man who has stood on a number of manifestos for different parties and is so attached to the promises that he made that he was willing to betray them on the floor of the Assembly and to zigzag across the floor here. So I don't need to hear questions from him on that sort of issue, because his own history simply illustrates how hollow those questions are. I didn't accuse the Prime Minister of lying. I put him right on that the last time he said that. I pointed out that the official spokesperson of the Prime Minister had been put up to say something that documents which were then revealed in front of a Scottish court turned out to be untrue. And I don't think it is wrong to point that out. On the M4 Relief Road, we have rehearsed the arguments here. I came to my decision. I stand by that decision. It was the right decision to make.
So you stand by your decision. You said just now it's to do with the climate change emergency, but you didn't say anything about that in your decision notice, did you? Now, First Minister, the decision notice talked about the environment and the Gwent levels. It did not mention climate change.
We need to,
now,
hear the question. We need to hear the question.
First Minister,
can the question be heard in some silence, please? Mark Reckless.
I have always backed Brexit. I've never lied about it. Now, you use that word, at least that's what I recall you using, or the meaning of what you were saying. Yet, your party, you, almost everyone behind you, said that you would respect the referendum. Yet now your policy is to go to the European Union, if I understand it correctly, and negotiate a deal so you could come back here and campaign against it. And that deal you're looking to negotiate is even more of a Brexit in name only than what the Conservatives have been offering us. It will be, frankly, an in referendum. It's very difficult to judge whether it's the Lib Dems or Plaid saying revoke, just ignore the referendum, we know best, or it's you forcing people through the charade of an in referendum that will be more of a betrayal of the people of Wales. Could I just read the First Minister two statements? The first is from the forward, from his predecessor, Carwyn Jones, from the forward of Securing Wales's Future. A majority in Wales voted to leave the European Union, and the Welsh Government has been clear from the outset that this democratic decision must be respected. Then the Council General, shortly before that, before the Government, said the people of the UK voted to leave the European Union. I respect that decision, and we will not work against the referendum result. First Minister, weren't they lies?
So for 2 years and more, this Labour government argued for a form of leaving the European Union that would have respected the result of the referendum, but would have protected jobs and economies here in Wales. He attacked those proposals time after time after time, describing them, as he has again today, as leaving the European Union in name only. We put forward those proposals because with Plaid Cymru, in the aftermath of the referendum, we understood the people in Wales had voted to leave the European Union, but as Steffan Lewis, our colleague here, said at the time, they never voted to take leave of their census. And that meant that if we were to leave the European Union, it had to be done on terms and in a way that would have protected their futures, and that's what we tried to promote. It became clear to us, particularly as a new leader of the Conservative Party was elected, that that possibility had simply evaporated. That no matter how hard we argued for it, and no matter how cogent our position was, it was never going to make a difference to somebody who, as the member here said, wasn't interested in the arguments. He's always been in favour of Brexit. Say what you like about it, demonstrate how harmful it will be, he'll be for it, come what may. So we decided at that point that the decision should go back to the people. And a Labour government will deliver exactly that. There will be a credible leave option on the ballot paper, so he will be able to go on campaigning to leave the European Union, misguided as I've always believed him to be. Yes. But for those of us who believe that Wales's future is better off inside the European Union, there will be a second opportunity to put that to people, to make those arguments, to persuade people on the basis of everything that we have learned in the 3 years since that referendum, that that's where our future lies. I look forward to us being able to do just that. And his arguments, I think, will be exposed yet again for the ideologically driven, evidence-free, careless of the future set of proposals that it has always been.
Question 3, Mike Hedges.
Question 3, Mike Hedges.
Will the First Minister make a statement regarding the safety on the M4 in the Swansea area?
Llawer the Welsh Government continually monitors the safety of the M4 and addresses any immediate issues as a matter of urgency. A wide range of measures to improve safety and transport opportunities along the M4 West corridor has now been identified, and we will make that report publicly available by the end of September.
Can I thank the First Minister for that response? As he's well aware, a large number of accidents of various degrees of seriousness have occurred between junction 45 and junction 47, which cover my constituency. I could continue it on into David Rees's constituency as well, but I won't do that. I think he'll have an opportunity later. But I think that it is a problem there. A number of regular users of the road have approached me concerned about drainage and the road surface, which they believe are contributing to accidents in this area. Will the First Minister arrange for an investigation of those concerned, and if they are proved to be correct, arrange for the problem to be rectified?
Well, thank Mike Hedges for that question. And he's right to say, of course, anybody who has followed the news over the month of August in particular will be aware of accidents that have happened between junctions 45 and 47 on the M4. That's why the WellTag Stage 1 study is important, Llawer, because it has identified potential improvements to safety and other matters on that part of the road, and that's why we will publish those proposals this month. Issues of drainage and the way in which road surfaces are constructed is a matter of safety. The design manual for roads and bridges sets out the standards that we use in Wales, but I will certainly ask officials to investigate whether issues of drainage and the state of the road surface did contribute, were believed to contribute to the accidents to which Mike Hedges refers.
Susie Davis.
Thank you for that reply. I look forward to seeing that report, First Minister. The safety, of course, of the air that we breathe remains an issue around certainly the western part of the M4 running through my region, and you'll recall that the extended 50-mile-an-hour temporary zone west of Port Talbot is no longer a temporary. However, I seem to recall that government officials advised that the legal change doesn't necessarily mean that the reduced speed limit will be permanent, stating that once air qualities improve beyond required levels, that the government will revisit the question of the speed limit in that area. Listening to your response to Paul Davies earlier, can you just confirm that it's still your intention to possibly increase that speed limit if there is a reduction in air pollution caused by vehicles? And in the meantime, what active steps are you taking to encourage the use of less polluting, publicly procured and publicly licensed vehicles in that part of my region?
Well, thank Susie Davis for that. We don't introduce a 50-mile-an-hour zone just for the sake of reducing the speed of traffic, as she says. It's there for a particular reason, because of the evidence that we have seen and believe to be compelling, that reducing average speeds to 50 miles an hour will make a difference to air quality, necessary differences to air quality, and of course we will monitor that very carefully. We would not want to be in a position where we achieve improvements in air quality then raise speed limits to find that air quality has gone back down again. So I don't think we can offer an immediate assurance that if air quality standards improve, that will mean that speed limits will go back up again. But what we do provide an assurance of is that we continually monitor it and we'll keep that question properly under review. Of course, Susie Davis is right, Llywydd, that beyond speed limits, we need vehicles that emit less pollution. And that's why it's been such good news that Wales has done so well in the competition to get funding for electric buses in Wales. And by changing the nature of the vehicles that we use, we will make a difference to air quality, not just in Swansea and in the part of the M4 that Mike Hedges referred to, but right through to Cardiff and to Newport as well.
Question 4, Rhiannon Passmore.
Question 4, Rhiannon Passmore.
What further contingency planning has the Welsh Government undertaken for the people of Islwyn following the publication of the Operation Yellowhammer document?
Thank you, Rhiannon Passmore, for that. Yesterday, the Welsh Government published our No Deal Brexit Action Plan. It reflects our engagement in Operation Yellowhammer and, for the people of Islwyn, our close working with local partner organisations, including the Gwent Police, local authorities and the Gwent Local Resilience Forum.
First Minister, the forced release of the Operation Yellowhammer document confirms what the Welsh Labour Government has been consistently stating publicly for many months, namely that a no-deal, cliff-edge Brexit could have enormous detrimental consequences for Welsh people, their families and our communities. Amidst the document's pages are non-worst case scenario warnings that some fresh supplies of food will decrease and that critical dependencies for the food chain, such as key ingredients, may be in shorter supply. Further, that UK citizens enjoying their holidays abroad to European Union countries may be subject to increased immigration checks at EU border patrols, causing serious delays and, critically, medical supply shortages. There may also be a rise, these are not my words, there may also be a rise in public disorder and community tensions. First Minister, these are just some of the Halloween horrors that the Tories are willing to inflict and wanting to inflict on my constituents, even though, as David Cameron has admitted this week, Boris Johnson didn't believe in Brexit and backed the Leave campaign, only to help his political career. What hope can you give to my constituents in Islwyn that this dystopian future, caused by a no-deal, cliff-edge Tory Brexit, can be in any way mitigated by a Welsh Labour government on their side always?
Well, Llywydd, the document that we published yesterday sets out the many actions that the Welsh Government has been working on over months past to do everything we can to mitigate the impact of a no-deal Brexit. The fact that we've developed a 12 to 15-week supply chain of medical devices and clinical consumables, that we have a bank of animal vaccines set up in case there is an outbreak of disease, that we have worked closely with supermarkets, all the major supermarkets, about food supplies here in Wales, and in particular the things that we have done to safeguard the future of vulnerable people in Wales in the event of a no-deal Brexit. The Yellowhammer document sets it out. A no-deal Brexit will fall more harshly on the shoulders of those least able to bear that burden than anybody else. There will be rises in food prices, there will be rises in fuel prices, there will be rises in energy prices, and these will be borne by families in Wales who have had their benefits frozen since 2015. And the things that we are doing as a Welsh Government set out in our action plan demonstrates our determination to focus upon the most vulnerable in our society in aiming to protect them from the self-inflicted harm that leaving the European Union without a deal would mean.
Mohammed Ashkar.
First Minister, do you accept that the Operation Yellowhammer document is not a prediction of what is likely to happen, but it describes a worst-case scenario for the purposes of government planning? And do you also recognize that the UK government in London has stepped up preparation to mitigate any impact of no-deal Brexit for whole United Kingdom including Wales?
You see, Llywydd, this simply doesn't stand up to examination.
Yes, it does.
Yellowhammer is what the government describes as a reasonable worst case. It's not the worst case. It's not an exaggerated account of the harm that will come to the United Kingdom. It is what a reasonable person would assess to be the impact of Brexit in a worst case. And we are heading into that worst case. And any idea that this UK government has been working hard in a way that will simply mitigate and wipe away the impact of a no-deal Brexit, they don't believe it, I can tell you that. They don't believe it at all, and neither should anybody here.
Andy Jones.
Thank you, Llywydd. First Minister, I'm particularly concerned with the supply of drugs and medicine to those that need them post-Brexit. How did I know you'd all? Yeah.
Let's hear the reason for the concern.
Thank you. There appear to be claims and counterclaims and claims again about security of supplies. Can you please allay the fears, the real fears that many constituents have because of all these things what people keep saying, and confirm that your government has secured the medicine it needs to keep the Welsh NHS working, mitigating all the stress people are listening to?
Well, Llywydd, let's be clear with Mandy Jones and other members here that medicines that we rely on here in Wales come through the short straits, and that the UK government, in its own predictions, say that UK traffic could fall by 40 to 60% between Calais and Dover in the event of a no-deal Brexit. That's why we have had to take the actions that we have taken to try to mitigate the impact that that would have on the supply of medicines here in Wales. It's inevitable. It's not a matter of shaking heads and sounding as though this is some sort of ideological point. It's an intensely practical issue. If those ports cannot bring in the supplies of medicines as they do today, there will be an impact on the availability of those medicines in the United Kingdom. And there are some medicines on which we rely that can't afford to sit and wait in a queue because they have short shelf lives, and that's particularly true of isotopes in the radioisotopes in the treatment of cancer. That's why there is a plan with the UK government to get round the ports issue by flying those supplies into the United Kingdom. But if those supplies arrive at an airport and then there is logistical chaos because the lorries you're relying on are caught in a queue somewhere in Kent or aren't able to move back from the continent in the way that was expected, there's no guarantee that anybody can offer that those plans will deliver everything as they are today. Who would possibly embark on this course of self-harm? This is not inevitable. This could be stopped. It ought to be stopped, and then we wouldn't be having these conversations.
Alan Davis.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I think reading through the document that the UK government was forced to release by the courts, you understand why the UK government didn't want the public to see this. I'm reminded of Aneurin Bevan when he told us, how can wealth persuade poverty to use its political power to keep wealth in power? This is a document that describes the impact of Brexit on the poorest people of this country. It describes the impact of no deal on the sick, on the vulnerable. It describes how the people who can barely afford to buy food today and rely on food banks will see increases in food prices and a reduction of access to fresh food. This is a document that the UK government sought to keep secret. It is also, First Minister, of course, a document that doesn't mention Wales. Devolved administrations are mentioned in the penultimate paragraph in terms of fishery protection. There is nothing here, yet the UK government, you would have hoped, would understand that many of the matters here are the responsibility of the Welsh Government. Many of the responsibilities in dealing with these matters are the responsibility of the Welsh Government. And First Minister, can you reassure us that the United Kingdom Government understands in any way the impact of a no-deal Brexit on the poorest people in this country? And can you reassure us, First Minister, that this Welsh Labour Government will continue to stand up for people in communities up and down this country?
Well, Llywydd, I thank Alan Davies for that question. I hear members around the Chamber who persuaded people in Wales to leave the European Union now trying to deny the impact that that will have in their lives. And there is no denying it. If you read Yellowhammer, it is as clearly set out there as you could wish. People who live on the smallest incomes in our society spend a larger proportion of their incomes securing the basics of everyday life, food, energy, fuel. It takes a far higher proportion of their incomes than it does people in this chamber. And they will have to find money to deal with the consequences of Brexit, and they will be the least able people to do that. I can give Alan Davies an absolute assurance. I attended a meeting of the latest UK committee myself last week. I pointed to that paragraph in Yellowhammer. I asked the UK government what plan it had to put money into the pockets of those families in Wales and in the United Kingdom whose incomes have been held down, who have seen prices rising and will now be asked to pay the cost of a no-deal Brexit. It's their responsibility to do that. It's the very least that they should do to protect those most vulnerable people.
Question 5, Gareth Bennett.
Question 5, Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. What assessment has the Welsh Government made of nitrogen dioxide levels along the A470 corridor in South Wales Central?
So with nitrogen dioxide levels have been monitored before and after the initial implementation of that 50-mile-per-hour speed limit. Findings will be monitored and reported before the end of this month, when a full 12 months' worth of post-implementation data will have been collated and analysed.
Thanks. Thank you for the answer. And of course, there are major concerns over the amount of pollution emanating from the A470. I was listening to your answer earlier to Susie Davis's question, which was a related one, although hers was about the M4. Now, you say there's compelling evidence. We can have a look at that, of course. The observation of many of my constituents who regularly use that road to commute is that they're seeing an increased occurrence of traffic jams. And, of course, there is the danger that traffic jams could tend to worsen the amount of polluting toxins in the air. So when you do monitor the evidence that arises, if it transpires that the situation has worsened, would you be of a mind to consider possibly removing the 50-mile-per-hour zones?
Well, Llywydd, we will certainly monitor the position very closely. The evidence is that 50-mile-an-hour zones, when properly preserved, prevent queues rather than add to them. And the section of the A470 between Upper Boat and Bridge Street interchange is an area where we know that the figures demonstrate that there is an urgent and immediate need to bring about improvements in air quality. We will do more over this autumn to put up information that explains to people why they are being asked to observe that 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, and to explain to them that they are being asked to do it because the scientific evidence demonstrates that they will be making a contribution to improving air quality for those communities that they are driving through. I think we've always been able to make an appeal to people in Wales to understand that collective effort has an impact on the lives of other people. We haven't explained that well enough and persistently enough to people so far. I am optimistic that when we do that, we will see people observe that 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, and that it will both improve air quality and reduce queuing and do good in the lives of people who today suffer the impact of the actions that other people take in travelling through those communities.
Question 6, Russell George.
Question 6, Russell George.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the performance of services provided by Transport for Wales?
With Transport for Wales will deliver the Wales and Border rail franchise through a £5 billion investment in Welsh railways over the next 15 years.
Thank you for your answer, First Minister. The level of service on the rail network in Wales has been wholly unacceptable over the summer. I have received dozens and dozens of complaints, either with people copying me into their own correspondence to Transport for Wales or constituents contacting me directly, not to mention the issues aired over social media. Complaints fall into a number of categories, which include cancelled trains, lack of staff, delayed trains, overcrowding and standing room only, signalling problems and lack of appropriate carriages, and a lack of quality information when issues do occur. When Transport for Wales took over the franchise last year, they raised expectations, and the Welsh Government also told rail users they would see improvements. Can you tell rail users today when they can expect to see the improvements that you promised last year?
I saw information put out by the member over the summer in which he complained that only 97% of trains on the Cambrian line had run over the summer. I think there are people in Thameslink who would think they'd arrived in rail heaven if his government was able to deliver 97% of all planned services on that line. The member will have seen yesterday the announcement made of £194 million worth of investment in railway stations across Wales, and that will certainly attend to the point that the member made, which was a fair point about... the member will need to listen rather than speak, and then he would have a chance of hearing the answer to his question, wouldn't he? The £194 million investment announced yesterday will certainly attend to the fair point the member made. That's what I was about to say when he started interrupting me, about information being provided to passengers. The member said when he was interrupting me that Transport for Wales has said the performance on some lines, including the Cambrian line, has not been acceptable over this summer, and they are working hard with Network Rail to make sure that signalling difficulties which were experienced on that line are being put right. Of course, we want to see further improvements. The £5 billion investment that I referred to earlier will certainly deliver that. People, I believe, are already seeing improvements in many parts of the rail service in Wales, and that's what they will continue to see as the franchise unfolds.
Question 7, Carwyn Jones.
Question 7, Carwyn Jones.
First Minister, what measures are in place to prevent the avoidance of the extra council tax on second homes?
The measures to which the member refers are set out in the revised and strengthened non-domestic rating order passed by this Assembly in 2016. Responsibility for the effective operation of these procedures lies with local authorities and the Valuation Office Agency.
First Minister, while listening to the radio last week, I was struck by an advert I heard on a commercial station that began by informing people of how they could create an extra income out of their second homes, and ended by saying take action now in order to avoid the extra council tax on second homes. Will the First Minister agree with me that it is morally repugnant for companies to be offering, or businesses to be offering, this kind of advice? It is something that creates a situation where tax can be avoided, and it encourages people to buy second homes in order to rent them out to holidaymakers, thus, of course, creating a situation where young people particularly can't afford to live in their own rural communities. Does the First Minister share my abhorrence of the message that advert gave, and will he condemn any attempts to try to get around the law?
Well, I certainly do that, and do it as strongly as the member just has. Tax avoidance is morally repugnant. Tax evasion is straightforwardly criminal and against the law. I didn't hear the advert myself, but I would have to warn anybody listening to it that if they think they are going to enter into a contrived arrangement in order to evade the council tax, then they will find themselves in receipt of very large accumulated bills when that is found out. And if any firm were to offer advice to somebody with the express intention of contriving an arrangement in which the law of the land can be avoided, then they would be, I believe, vulnerable to criminal prosecution for fraud. There is a very clear and legal set of requirements. If you are to let your house as a accommodation that is self-catering, you have to make that property available for 140 days in any year, and it has to be let for 70 of those 140 days as a minimum. Those are legal requirements. They are set out in that way in the VOA's forms that people have to fill in, and there is a dedicated team here in the VOA in Wales which validates the evidence that's produced about self-catering premises and carries out regular spot checks to make sure that the law is being observed. Anybody who thinks that the law is a soft touch in this area and that you can evade it or avoid it easily will rapidly come unstuck. Every single example that local authorities in Wales have provided to the VOA have been investigated by the valuation agency. And I invite local authorities, as I know my colleagues did yesterday in a meeting with them, I absolutely invite local authorities to provide that evidence. If there is genuine evidence of the law not being properly applied and the dedicated team that the VOA have to make sure that it is, then of course we will take action. But we can only take action if the evidence itself is supplied, and only local authorities are in the right position to do that. Please make sure that if they have the evidence, they send it in.
Ac yn ola cwestiwn 8.
Finally, question 8, Rhun ap Iorwerth. As much as I would like to have joined in that discussion, I will ask my own question. Will the First Minister make a statement on the decision to end the current free swimming scheme?
Thank you for that question. The free swimming initiative has not ended. Following an independent review commissioned by the Sports Council for Wales, it has been revised. The new version will provide more opportunities for young people and the over 60s from the more disadvantaged areas of Wales.
The current scheme has come to an end, of course, and there are implications to that. Rightly or wrongly, the free swimming scheme has become a crucial part of how local government pays for its leisure services because of the unsustainable cuts that have taken place in funding. Now, free swimming funding in Anglesey, for example, is cut in half by the decision to revise, and quite simply the council won't be able to afford to fill that gap of £30,000. Some 20,000 people per annum take advantage of this, and that figure will go down. Now, first, we must have a commitment of real additional funding for councils next year, but on the specific issue, given the preventative value of free swimming in improving health today, tackling obesity today in order to prevent ill health and to save money for the NHS tomorrow, will the First Minister admit that revising this programme and cutting the budget so much is sure to lead to a reduction in the number of users and is contrary to the principles of the Wellbeing Future Generations Act?
Well, I don't believe that the evidence demonstrates that to be true, Llywydd.
The scheme. When the scheme was first introduced in 2004-05, over 800,000 swims took place by young people under the scheme. Last year, it had fallen to 126,000. If you don't think that those figures deserved a review, then I don't think that would be a fair conclusion to draw. And yet, the number of swims by young people has gone up in Wales over that period. So the idea that by removing the scheme as it currently stands, it automatically leads to the unintended, and as I see it, not to be realised consequences doesn't stand up to examination. More people under the age of 16 are swimming in Wales than ever before, and yet fewer and fewer and fewer of them were taking advantage of the free swimming initiative. The money that is not being devoted by Sports Council of Wales to this scheme is being spent by them instead on a series of healthy and active fund projects. 4 of those new projects will be happening on the island of Anglesey. It's not that money is being taken away from these purposes, it's just that it's going to be spent in a different way, precisely in order to deliver the sorts of outcomes that Rhun ap Iorwerth referred to in his supplementary question.